What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. It's another edition of, well, we still are looking for the name of this show, podcast, whatever you want to
I
call it.
saw some decent ones this time, Nick. I
Herb, we
saw
will discuss
some
because so
decent
did
ones.
I. So did I. But I'm Nicholas Moreano. That's Herb Howard. This is a Friday edition of our show here and plenty to talk about on this Friday here. But Herb, it's always great catching up with you at the end of the week and just everything that comes with, Bears football topics and things like that. But we get a whole week to decompress and then talk about it on today's show.
Yeah, man, it's always fun, man. It seems like, for about the third year in a row now, the Bears are a hot topic on the offseason as much as during, the regular season. And so definitely still lots to get into, lots to talk about. And, you go through another week of topics and issues and news and you get together and chop it up with you, man. So it's always a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think to kind of start things off here, let's just start with like kind of the latest thing that happened. And for a lot of Bears fans, a lot of people around the NFL, that was Virginia McCaskey, passing away, but also a lot of people attending her wake there in Des Plaines, Illinois, just yesterday.
Yeah,
And Herb, I knew I knew a lot of people would show up to this because it's Virginia McCaskey.
sure.
Just her name alone. I mean, prestigious in herself, but just seeing that it was not only current players from the Bears organization,
No.
former players,
Yep.
the commissioner, GMs, former
Yep.
head coaches. It just really highlights like how important she was to the NFL world and beyond it, because there are also Bears fans also showing up to this wake there in Des Plaines. And I think it's just really telling to show that regardless of, how old Virginia McCaskey was, like she'll never be removed from, football lore and just what she meant to not just the Bears organization, but to the entire NFL.
I mean, she's literally NFL royalty, right? I mean, her father is the founding father of the National Football League. And so, he was a part of the people that started this whole entire thing. And so, I wasn't surprised to see everybody show up. I mean, just out of respect, you have to. Mm-hmm. But then you hear people talk, and it's like, well, yes, that part of it too. But no, we really had a ton of personal admiration for who she was as a person and what she meant individually to certain people, and to the National Football League as a whole. You saw, like you said, former players like Richard Dent, Robbie Gould, and all players from all different generations, the commissioners there, other people from around the league are there. And like you said, it just speaks to what high regard there's so many people around the National Football League held her in. And so she certainly lived a long, wonderful, and prosperous life. And by all accounts that I've heard from players that I know and had an opportunity to speak to, or just players that I saw speaking on the radio or heard speaking on the radio, saw speaking, around the internet or whatever, everybody had nothing but positive things to say about their time around Virginia McCaskey.
And I think what one of the cool things is like you mentioned that word respect. Like, even though there are some of those players that did attend yesterday's wake, it didn't quite end on the most positive note. Like, you look at Brian Urlacher, for example. I think how things ended with his career in Chicago, he was still there. And so again, it does just show the respect that is being given to her. But I also want to give like a quick shout out to DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet. Those guys, they showed up. They were not only there for the wake, but they were there for Ben Johnson's introductory press conference. And I think that's really telling when it's those three guys too, because those are going to be leaders those are leaders now and are going to be leaders in years to come for this Bears offense as they're kind of developing under Ben Johnson. So being there at that wake, I think just it shows like who are the front facing faces of this Bears organization. Those are just the offensive guys. And it was just nice to see that, they're there for that big moment. There for Ben Johnson's introductory press conference. Caleb Williams was also there at the press conference as well. But it's just like, those are the players that you do want to see in these big kind of moments in the history of the franchise. So just want to give a quick shout out to those players because I think they deserve it. And obviously are going to be ones that are going to be very important for this Bears organization moving forward.
Talking about leadership and accountability. Those are huge topics throughout the season last year. And those are going to be the guys that have to lead you in that area. And so for them to continually show up for moments that matter for this organization, for this franchise as a whole, speaks volumes about how they are embracing their roles as leaders on this team.
No doubt about it. Herb, the next, I guess, latest topic around the NFL, around just what kind of happened with this 2024 season was obviously the Super Bowl. And when I saw a phone call from Herb Howard as I'm watching the Super Bowl, I'm like, wait, what's going on? What's going on here? Herb's calling me. And to be completely honest, I forgot all about the bet. And I know we talked about that Friday. So 2 days removed from it, I forgot about it. So I call and you say that you didn't cash out. And man, you were so right. Before we get to like takeaways from that game, I mean, just what was your overall feeling knowing that you had this bet that you placed back in September?
Yeah, September 5th. September 5th is when I placed the bet. And I tweeted that out sometime in January that I had, while the Eagles were on their run. And I tweeted that out, and some people were like, maybe, you must have bet on a bunch of teams. It's like, no, just one. Just one team. I thought they had the most complete roster. And at the time, the bet was plus 1,400. And so it was like, okay, long shot, but I thought it was worth it. And then, they went ahead and got it done. I will say this, it helped me a little bit because once the game started, like right at kickoff, they suspended the cash out. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm kind of locked into it anyway, but I still felt pretty good about it. I was just holding on to the possibility that if it got late in the game and Patrick Mahomes had the chance for the ball, I would just cash out immediately. But they kind of took that possibility away, and so I was locked into it, which was cool. But then the game got started, and boom, right away they up. They up 10, and they up 17 with the pick six, and then they up 24, and I'm like, wow. And I think that's right when I called you. I'm like, Nick, I didn't cash out.
I told my whole family about it too. I'm like, man, why is Herb calling? And they're like, oh, that's why he's calling, because he has his bet that he placed back in September. And, at that point when it's 24, nothing. It's like even though it's Patrick Mahomes on the other side, it's like you have a really good feeling just how that game went, which way it was going to lean and which way it was ultimately going to end. But man, kudos to you for making that bet in the first place, writing it out. Like, to be completely honest, I don't know if I would have done it, like, just because I picked the Chiefs to win. I'm like, okay, I think they're going to win. Like, I just have a feeling that if I had that bet myself, I would have cashed out at whatever it was and then missed out on obviously a bigger payday. But kudos to you for sticking through it and obviously getting some money in the end.
Yeah, it would have been a nice win even if I had cashed out before the game. So I wouldn't have blamed you or even myself if I had cashed out and they still won. I'm like, well, whatever. I'm cool. Like, because you don't want to be in a position of betting against Pat Mahomes for one game. So, but like I said, I really did think they had the better roster, and I think that's what kind of played out as you went through the game. You look at the matchups, and across the board, the Eagles were dominating the individual matchups. They didn't blitz, Nick, the whole game. No. They don't blitz, and they get home constantly. They get 6 sacks, they get 16 pressures, and it's like in 42 dropbacks. And so all game long, they are just dominating these matchups. And you look at the Chiefs group of wide receivers, there's not a wide receiver on their roster that could win in one-on-one man-to-man coverage against the Eagles DBs. When you talk about Slay and Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, like, they couldn't beat those guys one-on-one, let alone they get to drop 7 back into coverage every single snap because they're getting home with the front 4. And so the matchups just were not in their favor. And then up front, what Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, those guys were able to do in the middle of that defense, because as you see Josh Sweat dominating on the edge, and you're like, well, him and Nolan Smith, and you're like, well, you need to probably chip and help out, or maybe have the guards, shift that way. And it's like, well, you can't do that because you got to pack in the interior, because if you leave Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and like, they're going to wreck your game plan all day long. And so now you got Sweat one-on-one, and he's dog walking your tackle right back into Patrick's lap. And that led to one of the interceptions, the one that Bond had inside the 10. And it's just, the matchups just were not in their favor. You flip it over to the offensive side of the ball for the Eagles, it was the same thing. I mean, any coach in their right mind, shout out to Coach Spagnuolo, who's one of the best DCs to ever do it, say, we got to stop Saquon Barkley. That's number one. He's having a historic season. He's having a probably even more historic playoff run. And they put all their focus and attention to stopping him, but then you got a problem. You got a problem.
Yeah.
You got 8 men in the box, and you got 3 people to deal with, Smitty and A.J. Brown, and that's a problem. On that one play where he hit Devontae Smith down the left sideline, it was pick your poison. You had single high with man coverage, and it was like, okay, whichever way that safety goes, I'm throwing this deep ball the other way. So when the safety went over the top of AJ, he threw it to Devontae Smith. If he had went over to Smitty, he would have certainly thrown it to AJ. And it's like, you just can't. They have too many weapons. The matchups just were not in the Chiefs' favor.
No, they weren't. And you know what? I love that play to Devontae Smith. One of the takeaways I had from this game is like, when you're in a position to go for the kill shot, you take it. And there's a clip going around with NFL Films. They filmed Nick Sirianni on the sideline. He was talking to Kellen Moore at the time. And, he said, Nick Sirianni, if we score, it's over. Just call it. And he's saying that to Kellen Moore. And that was the deep shot touchdown to Devontae Smith. And once you do that, you execute on it, the game's over. You took any life that was maybe in the Chiefs still hanging on at that point and sucked it right out of the Super Bowl. And that was it. And that's it. And then you ultimately, it was leaning that way in the first place, but that was a touchdown that officially sealed it. I'm sure Herb at that time's like, that money is mine, but that's what I like. I like that though from Nick Sirianni. And, and I'm thinking about how this applies to the Bears, like as hopefully the Bears are putting up a competitive roster and becoming more competitive in these games and are looking to maybe finish a team off, you have that aggressive mindset. Because you know that you can execute on that type of play. You trust your quarterback to make that play. You trust the protection and your receiver to get open. That all happened on that one play to Devontae Smith. And that was, one of the reasons why the Eagles were able to pull off that victory. But it was really telling, and one that I'm like, okay, Ben Johnson, if you have that type of mentality in you, which I think he does, that's going to bode well for this Bears organization.
I got to find that clip because I love it. I get chills even just like you describing it because that sounds amazing. It reminds me of head coach Brian Billick for the Ravens when they won that Super Bowl back in 01, I think. When they won that Super Bowl, there's a clip from Brian Billick in there, and they're driving, and he goes, "You score a touchdown here, man. We're world champions. Field goal, maybe." And they get the touchdown. It was over. Like, it was just completely over. So I love to hear that clip. I got to go find it as soon as we get done here for sure.
I'll send it to you for sure. No doubt about that. Really quickly, just kind of as I'm thinking about takeaways, and I do want to hear from you too, Herb, like what kind of stands out. But one that I do want to mention really quickly, what I think separates, good GMs from great GMs, and how I look at Howie Roseman and what he was able to do constructing that Eagles roster. Like, you do have to take some chances here. Just some gambles in terms of players and giving guys like second chances. And it's not going to work out for everybody, but if you're obviously a good GM and you find those right players, it can. And you look at a guy like Mekhi Becton, someone that was an integral part of that Eagles offensive line, but he wasn't anything guaranteed when they brought him over on a 1-year deal in 2024.
No, he was
most likely, a bust. I mean, guy that was, injured over there, the number 11th overall pick. He was actually picked ahead of Tristan Wirfs, who's a all-pro tackle for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But it just looked like his career trajectory was really heading in the wrong direction. And then he moves inside to guard, plays 15 games in the regular season for the Eagles, and ultimately becomes a Super Bowl champion. But I just look at like a guy like Howie Roseman. Maybe you had the luxury of taking that risk because of the roster you had established up to that point, but he at least took that risk, gave that guy a 1-year deal, and now he's in for a payday in free agency if he's not retained by the Philadelphia Eagles. But it's taking chances on talented players and knowing how to properly use them. If you could do that, if you're Ryan Poles, you got to show that you could do that and identify those players. Then that's how you can build a roster with maybe outside pieces that the rest of the league is viewing as trash, maybe in a way, but you see him as a luxury, an asset to your team. So there are a bunch of players I think apply to that type of that model that can make a championship team one that comes away with a Super Bowl.
Calculated risk, man. Like, you got to take calculated risk when you talk about player acquisition, and they've been willing to do that. They did it with Becton. Obviously, everybody knows around Chicago they did it with Jalen Carter when the Bears were not willing to do that. And to me, and I've been a big supporter of Ryan Poles, I remain that way. But to me, that, like, if you're gonna say, "Oh, we're not ready to bring this kid in," then And that's on you. Like, what are you doing? Like, why don't you be more hands-on with the kid to make sure he's able to assimilate himself into the professional game and do the things that he needs to get done? And so, you know, when you make those types of decisions, you know, it can pay off for you, and it certainly has paid off for the Jets and their ability. I mean, look at what they go out and get Bond from the Saints. He was a backup linebacker in New Orleans. He comes out here. He has an All-Pro year, and he's about to get broke off right now. To hell with my bet. He the one that made doggone money on Sunday. Like, he's finna get paid, and that's really, really good for him. But you know, they just took some chances on some people, and they got a great blend of some veterans like Big Play Slay on the outside, and they're getting that young kids like Cooper DeJean on the outside. It's like, you put these guys together, Quinyon Mitchell. I mean, they go out and draft 2 starting corners, man. Like, that's not easy to do. That's rare in one draft, and for them both to come in and have the caliber years that they had, it speaks volumes about, one, their ability to evaluate talent, and then 2, their ability to then bring those guys into their system, let them use their particular skill set in the best way that can help that team. I was going to say the defense, but that entire team.
Yeah, no, the entire team. I mean, that's why they won the Super. You look at the talent, the entire roster, and you mentioned that earlier. Like, it's a roster that you look in that matchup. Yes, the Eagles are a better team, but Herb, before we were like obviously jumping on live to talk about this, you know, you wanted to also put to bed the idea of what type of quarterback it takes to win a Super Bowl, and I'm curious what you got here.
Stressing me out, bro, because this, for me, it just keeps coming back to, I still think the Bears made the wrong decision at quarterback last offseason. And I know that's going to run some people out of the room, and that's perfectly fine with me, because most people are not able to hear the nuance in any conversation. So it immediately becomes this Caleb or Justin conversation. Which quarterback is better? And that's not the conversation. Which path is better to build a Super Bowl roster? I don't think there's anybody around the league that's going to tell you that Jalen Hurts is the best quarterback in the league or top 5 quarterback in the league. But what he is the quarterback that's gone to 2 Super Bowls in the last 3 years, because they recognized his skill set, thought they could win with it if they leaned into his skill set and built a roster around him. He's a guy that has a unique skill set in terms of run and pass. He's a guy that's a great leader. His teammates like him. They want to follow him, and he's an ultimate competitor. So you put that on display, and then you go ahead and build a team around him, you can win. So, I mean, Joe Burrow might be the best quarterback in the league. Not talking about Patrick Mahomes. Joe Burrow might be the best. No Super Bowls. Josh Allen, just won league MVP. No Super Bowls. Justin Herbert, immensely talented, finally made it to the playoffs. So you can go and find the best quarterback if you want, but can you build the best roster, the best, most complete roster to go out and win a Super Bowl? That was my perspective last year. It's still my perspective. You had the number 1 pick that was going to net you a king's ransom if you leveraged it, because everybody wanted Caleb Williams. And if you felt comfortable that you could win with Justin as your quarterback, which I certainly did, then you can go out and leverage that pick, and you can get 2 or 3 first-round picks. And now you're going forward with all these first-round picks, and you say, well, shoot, now I'm in position where I was able to add to my offensive or defensive line last year. I still could have got the wide receiver, whether it's Rome Odunze or it's Marvin Harrison Jr., and now you still got all these picks going forward. Now you can put yourself in a position where you say, hey, now do we have the luxury to start to leverage these picks? Maybe we can move up the board and get Abdul Carter and put him opposite Montez Sweat. Like, there's a lot of different things you can do in terms of, now you can build a complete team. And the Eagles were doing that, man. And people were talking like they hit this lightning in a bottle, once in a lifetime type of thing. It's like, no, they didn't. They just believed in the skill set of their quarterback. They drafted and developed well. They put every Georgia Bulldog they could find on their defense. And like, I mean, it's a lot of them dudes, man. They got Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. They got Nolan Smith. They got Nakobe Dean. Like, it's just on and on and on and on. So, I don't think they did anything particularly special. They did their jobs well. That is your job as an executive in the National Football League, to build a complete roster and give your team an opportunity to win consistently, go to multiple Super Bowls in a short period of time. That's what they did. That's what they have done, and it's going to continue to pay dividends for them.
You know, I think there's no denying how the Eagles did it is exactly what you just talked about. They don't have the best quarterback in the league, but they do have the best roster and they won a Super Bowl. That's one way of going about it. I wonder if
now if you got, I'm
yeah.
sorry, bro. If you got Patrick Mahomes, cool, right? Then you can go to 5 Super Bowls in 7 years. If you got Patrick Mahomes, but he's Mount Rushmore quarterbacks. It's him, it's Tom Brady. For me, it's Joe Montana, and then whatever 4th quarterback you want to put on there, right? But that's Mount Rushmore. If you think you're just going to dip into the draft and draft off Mount Rushmore, I believe that's a far larger odds than you've been able to accumulate picks, draft well, build a system around your quarterback skill set, and then go from there. So if you're going to tell me, well, it's either, the way I'm talking about building around that quarterback, getting a complete roster, or Patrick Mahomes, I'll take Patrick Mahomes. Sure, he's a quarterback that can get you to 5 and 7 years. But I'm also going to tell you, how the hell are we going to get Patrick Mahomes? Like, how do we even identify that? Nobody identified. People didn't identify Patrick Mahomes as Patrick Mahomes. Tom Brady went 199. So if that's the Mount Rushmore, how do we find these guys, right? So, I get it, but
there's not an exact science with this, Herb, because if you're doing that route, if every GM's thinking that route, it's like, that's fool's gold. There's not a generational type guy that's going to bring you to the Super Bowl every single year like Patrick Mahomes has done recently. But I wonder if GMs also look at it this way, as if you're trying to build a roster and you're building it with all this talent, it's also harder to keep all that talent because there are more factors involved if you just have the quarterback. Like you mentioned, some of the guys that obviously are regarded as some of the best: Joe Burrow, Herbert, obviously Mahomes, Allen, Lamar Jackson, those kind of guys. Yeah. But yet they don't still have. I mean, look at Patrick Mahomes in this Super Bowl. The best quarterback still loses to a better team. So I just think that there's this tug and pull with GMs and how roster building should be, because there are difficulties with both. Like, you're not going to identify the greatest quarterback to ever play this game just every single year. That guy doesn't exist every single year. But you're also, it's tough to build an entire roster, keep all that talent for a longevity of time, and then expect to still compete for Super Bowls. Like, I'm curious to see what this Eagles team looks like next season after teams are starting to pluck away from those pieces, because they are good players now. And so it makes it a little harder if you don't also have the quarterback that is, quote unquote, at the top of the league. So I could see it both ways, where you want to go this route with a quarterback or you want to build a team. If you're the Bears, you need to do both. You need Caleb to excel, but you also need to build around him, because if Patrick Mahomes can't do it, it's as good as a lot of people think Caleb Williams can be. Like, he still needs talent around him to get to that position, so that when they do get in the big game, hopefully in our lifetime, Herb, they're going to be well equipped to compete and maybe win that chip as we would all like to see. But yeah, it's a fascinating conversation, because if you put, let's say, for example, Justin Fields with, a roster that would have had a far more talent with all the picks they would have accumulated, where does that team go? How does Justin Fields look with that talent? We don't know. We'll never get to see that because it didn't happen, but it's just a bunch of different ways of roster building and how you can go to eventually compete for a championship.
And that's the thing you got to go through. Like, you're going to have to go through the Eagles for a while. They've set out their blueprint for what they want to do and how they want to play the game. And so, yeah, as these guys advance and then they move into their second contracts, you're not going to be able to afford all of them, but they're going to identify which ones they absolutely have to have. And then they're going to know what type of players they're looking for to fill the other gaps as they come up. And so they're going to be drafting those guys a year early, letting them sit, letting them learn, and then letting those other guys walk in free agency and go get their money or whatever they're going to do. But I think they're going to remain competitive because they've set the blueprint. They know exactly what it is they're trying to build, and they're going to be able to foresee these problems coming up and address them early, keep as many of them on rookie contracts as possible. That whole defense, they're all rookies, man. I mean, in terms of on their contracts, like, it's crazy. Now, as you're going to have to pay them, can you pay them all? Of course you can't pay them all, but you can pay who you got to have. You can franchise guys, and then you can replace the other guys. And that's just what it's going to have to be, because you're going to have to go through them. But they've also been able to take advantage of key free agent acquisitions when it's time and there's an all-time running back available like Saquon Barkley. Boom, you pounce on it and you get him and you put him in the backfield with your athletic quarterback, and then you have a huge problem. You get two dynamic weapons on the outside. You get a tight end that can eat up the middle of the field, and now you have a conundrum that no defense can figure out, And also, your defense is keeping teams out of the end zone. And so that's going to be a really, really tough thing to overcome. I don't care how good your quarterback is. We just saw them embarrass the best quarterback of his generation.
Man, and two, like, it's not even hitting on like the first and second round draft picks. Like the guy that I thought had a really good game was Jalix Hunt, the number 58 for the Eagles. Dude was playing in the Senior Bowl. He was a third round draft pick. It's like when you start to hit on those, in addition to the guys that they're hitting on day one, like then you're just not only accumulating talent in the trenches, which the Eagles have done so well for offensive and defensive line, but now it's just like, okay, now we're putting this guy into the rotation of the defensive line. When our, one of our first round draft picks has to come out, he's getting in there and also being productive. That is how it should be. That is exactly how it should be if you're a general manager, identifying those talent in the later rounds. And the third round is the killer for Ryan Poles right now. So he needs to get better at that to, put himself in, position to succeed moving forward.
It's that blueprint, man.
Oh, yeah.
Once you know the blueprint, you can more easily identify which guys fill which spots. And so you can see certain traits, certain characteristics in a guy in the third round and says, hey, I know he's a third round guy, but he plays a lot like X player from the past team that we can use him to fill that spot. They went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. So they've been honing in on this blueprint for a little bit now. They're ready, and I think they're going to be ready for a while, man. The NFC is going to have to figure out a way to get through that team if any of them, Bears, Vikings, Lions, Commanders, whomever, want to get to the Super Bowl. It's going to be a road through Philly.
I completely agree with that. Wherever Howie Roseman's like cheat sheet or notebook is at, like you just need to take a peek. Who do you got out there? Let's okay, we'll look at that player too. No, they identify talent, and that's why they've been in the Super Bowl the last 2 or 3 years. Herb, I also for this show I wanted to kind of look forward. Obviously now with football being over, it's kind of a sad time. But I also just wanted it is depressing. This will be the first Sunday coming up with. Well, I guess there was a week with no football, but football is done. But I also want to look forward as we're looking at this Bears team. And obviously there'll be a lot of players added through free agency, through the draft, things like that. But on this current roster, who are some of the guys that have the most to prove? We don't have to do a ranking like 5 to 1, but just as you're thinking of players, who needs to show you something in this 2025 season to maybe legitimize their draft status, their contract, what they're worth to this team moving forward. But who are just some guys that come to mind, and we could just list them back and forth here and kind of talk about them. And if people who are in the chat listening as well, who are some Bears players on this current roster as it stands today that have the most to prove in 2025? I'm going to throw it to you first. Who's the first guy that comes to mind?
Caleb Williams.
Yep.
I mean, I know that's low-hanging fruit, but that's just the fact of the matter. He's the face of the franchise. He's the most important player going forward. He had an up-and-down rookie year. We certainly saw him flash some of those rare traits that we heard about and knew about from his college tape, but the consistency simply was not there. The ability to learn and overcome some of those common mistakes when you talk about some of the sacks that he was taking. Now, certainly we understand a lot of that was on the offensive line, some of that was on the play calling, sure, but some of that was absolutely on 18, and he acknowledged that, and I gave him a lot of credit for acknowledging. He would always come to the podium and say, man, I can't take this sack, can't take that sack. It was like, bro, if you know that, then why do you keep doing that? And I'm talking about specific situational sacks, the 2-minute sacks, the third down sacks, the edge of field goal range sacks. Those are the ones that kill you. Those are the ones that you absolutely can't take. You got to get the ball out of your hands. You got to bail out of there. You got to do whatever. You just can't take sacks in those situations. And for as often as that happened throughout the season without any sign of improving in that particular area, that was a bit of a red flag for me. I think he can overcome that. But I want to see him do it. I want to see him be better situationally. And so I'm looking forward to see how he handles certain game situations moving into his second year.
That's definitely, he was one of the guys on my list. And the other thing too with Caleb Williams, now you have Ben Johnson as your head coach, play caller in this offense. And obviously everything he did in Detroit, he's going to try to make Caleb Williams' job easier and build this offense around him. So going into the 2025 season, despite having a fourth play caller in 2 years, I do expect to see progress. Yeah, it's a lot actually when you think about it, but I do still expect to see progress from Caleb Williams. And it should be right where you talked about it, in that ability to avoid sacks, get rid of the ball when he needs to, and just not make those mistakes that honestly kill drives. Like when there's stats out there when you take a sack on a particular drive, like it's not ultimately going to end the drive, but it's going to put your chances in a really low place to try to continue it. So yeah, I need to see that from Caleb Williams. Another guy though that I need to see more out of is Tyreek Stevenson. Especially, I mean, there was a lot that he went through last season, and everybody will think of the Hail Mary against the Washington Commanders, but teams knew to target him because you couldn't target Jalen. You didn't want to target Jalen. So for Tyreek Stevenson, I think this is going to be a big year, especially in this defense where, Jalen, I think we're going to see more of that shadowing the number one wide receiver. So for Tyreek going up against that second target, you're going to be targeted, I think, a lot on specific plays. But for Tyreek being a former second round draft pick, we want to see him meet that challenge and, ultimately win some of those 50-50 balls or whatever it may be, the challenge of just going up against the second wide receiver on a team and making sure that you handle your business essentially. So for Tyreek, I just need to see a little bit more of that. I think he's a capable player of making those big time types of plays. We've seen him with the interceptions, things like that, but just consistency really. So when that opportunity presents itself, Tyreek's able to handle it and just kind of you got to stay locked in mentally too, especially after some of the things that happened last season. So Tyreek definitely makes my list as well.
Makes a lot of sense, man. It's just about being a pro for Tyreek. He has to become a true professional at his craft. And it's down in, down out. It's attention to the details. It's staying mentally and emotionally strong and in control of yourself. And I think if he can do that, which is a tough thing, man, some people just aren't incapable of controlling their emotions, and they get excited and they get, wrapped up in the things that don't really matter. If he can do that, right? And he's got Jalen Johnson, right next to him. Like, just lean on that and become more of the type of person that Jalen is. And I mean the professional person that he is. 'Cause I like Tyreek as a person. I think he's perfectly fine as a dude. But as a professional cornerback in this league, you got to have a short memory. You got to push things to the side. You got to get on to the next play right now and be ready to go. And if he can do that, I think he can be a great contributor to this team. I know a lot of people are down on him and ready to give up on him, but he's got rare traits, man. He's 6'1". He's got long arms. Like, the dude could probably scratch his knees standing straight up. Like he's got long arms. He's physical. He supports in the run game. He's got ball skills. And he's a competitor. So I'm not ready to give up on him, but he absolutely needs to become a true professional at his craft. I think that's a good one.
And Herb, really quickly too, I do like the passion that he plays with. Like, you do need to have that type of passion too, especially at that position.
Sure.
And I think it was John Hoke that talked about that too at some point during the season. Like, that's who Tyreek is. So you can lean into that. It's just at some point, like you said, you just need to be professional about it. If you give a big play, like, come back the next play and make one yourself. But that passion is what probably got Tyreek Stevenson to this point in his career where he is a second-round draft pick in the NFL because he loves the game. He's competitive, but you just got to have that balance, man. But I completely agree with you on that.
Yeah, for sure. For me, the next guy I would look at is Montez Sweat. He comes over, mid-season in the trade last year. He leads 2 teams in sacks, first person to ever do that. And you talk about him just having this huge impact and being a multiplier on this entire defense. And then this year, that wasn't the case. I think he was hurt throughout the entirety of the season. I give him a lot of credit for fighting through that. But at the end of the day, it's about results and production, and it just wasn't there for him last year. And he needs to, be more consistent. He needs to come up. He needs to make those game-changing plays. He was not brought here to just be a guy. He wasn't brought here to be a good player. He's got to be a game-changing, game-wrecking defensive lineman for that team. I think they should be able to utilize him up and down the line of scrimmage, create mismatches for him. I think Dennis Allen is going to be able to scheme him up in those ways, but he's got to take, another step forward in terms of being, a guy that you're talking about, leading the league in sacks, or, talking about on the list of, defensive player of the year candidates. He's got to be that type of guy. He certainly has that type of ability. He has that type of physicality. I mean, you see that dude walking around the locker room. It's like, dude, like, what is this? Like, you know what I'm saying? That dude is absolutely different. It's like, hey man, like, I don't this ain't fair. Like you get a little upset with your creator when you look at that dude. It's like, damn,
Oh man.
what's up with me? Like,
Yeah, what did I do?
What did I do? Like, so he's got to be able to utilize that and become, that guy that impacts the game down in and down out. I think he has the ability to do it. He needs to get healthy and get this defense down pat, and then he's got to be an absolute leader out on that field each and every game day.
Herb, look, I swear, people who are watching, like, we didn't share our top 5 players. It's just great minds think alike. But yeah, Montez Sweat is also on mine, and it's a good point too. Like, this guy wasn't just brought in to fill a spot. Like, you're looking at contractual value here. Montez Sweat, he is just below that guy that everybody's probably going to want this offseason in Myles Garrett. And total value, $125 million for Myles Garrett, $98 million for Montez Sweat. So he's being paid to be the multiplier that if you had somebody else, it's like, yes, he should be able to get his own, but he should be able to get his own even if there isn't that guy. But again, I do like you said, I do think he was dealing with some injuries, and that defense at the back end of the season just wasn't doing a lot of things right. But yeah, Montez Sweat needs to prove that, not only was he worth trading that second round draft pick for, getting that extension, but he could be a difference maker. And I believe he can be. Does take a little bit of help though. So once the Bears add that, I think we'll see a better Montez Sweat.
What do we say about the Eagles? I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Because they have such dominant interior players, you cannot slide the offensive line to the outside. So once Andrew Billings goes down, that interior is not as impactful. And so now we can slide out, we can double team, we can chip, we can do all those things on the outside because we don't have to, divert all these resources to the inside. And so if the Bears can get stronger there, that'll also help him.
No doubt about it. And I think Eric Bochan also is looking at this, my top 5 guys. And I'm pretty sure he's on yours too here, but Tremaine Edmonds is another guy that, I just think we need to see a little bit more out of for a guy that, and, we've talked about this. I know I've talked about this prior to today, but he's a guy that is too physically gifted, much like a Montez Sweat at his position, to not be to not provide more of an impact on the game. He should be wrecking plays. And when he identifies things, it's go downhill, make the tackle on the running back, use your use your God-given size to lay somebody out, go make those plays. And he was showing a little bit more in the, last season in 2023, but in 2024, those impact plays weren't there. Then also just the traditional, let's go make a play behind the line of scrimmage. Those plays weren't there either, as much as his counterpart in TJ Edwards, we're seeing from him. And look, no shade to TJ, but you look at the two guys, there's a difference in physical makeup there, but one is playing the game faster and making more impactful plays than the other. And that's TJ Edwards, who is not being paid like Tremaine Edmonds is. So we just I think it's just a big year for him in general. He has one more year left on his contract after the 2025 season, and TJ is going into a contract year. So you need to see, I think, just Tremaine really show that he is worth keeping on this team, but that he could be a difference maker. And I know that, in the introductory press conference, Ben Johnson did highlight the linebackers in Tremaine and TJ when he was introduced as Bears head coach. So he obviously likes what he sees, but I think there's more that can be given from Tremaine Edmonds on this defense. So we'll see what he can do in 2025.
Yeah, I agree 100%, man. He's also one of those guys that make you feel, less blessed by a guy when you just see him. It's like, dang. And even like you said, TJ Edwards, their lockers are next to each other at Soldier Field. They're not together at Hallis Hall, but at Soldier Field, they're together. And so you come in there after the game, it's like, okay, well, TJ had 14 tackles and a sack, and he's like, well, this dude next to him, he's 6'5", and he's like he didn't have quite the same impact on the game as this dude over here. And you want to see that. You think he has that kind of ability. I don't know if it's, just not pulling the trigger in terms of the instincts and getting downhill and making plays immediately or whatever it is, but he's got to be more of an impact player. Nobody's sitting here and saying he's a bad football player. Nobody's sitting here and saying that, you're not happy to have him on your team, but you want him to be an impact player. If he's going to be a big free agent acquisition like he was, if he's going to have the contract that he does, you want him to make more of an impact on the game, and the Bears need him to. So certainly, like I said, with Montez, when Billings goes out, that's going to impact your linebackers. That allows those interior linemen to climb a little bit quicker. We had talked about that before, just how some of these teams were immediately climbing off the snap and like not even worrying about that first level. So that impacts you as well, man. But he's got the physical traits, he's got the speed and the athleticism. He's got to be able to make more impact plays. I agree with you 100%, man. You said Eric Bochan was in. He was looking at your list. Crystal was looking at mine because Darnell Wright is on my list as well. He's a guy that I need him to take that next step in terms of becoming an elite right tackle in the National Football League. It's going to be year 3 for you. You were drafted as a top 10 pick. You were drafted ahead. Not ahead. You weren't drafted ahead. You were drafted instead of Jalen Carter, right? You got to start to produce on that level, and not like also, like I said about Tremaine, not sitting here saying Darnell Wright's a bad football player. He's not. He's a good football player, but it's time for him to become a great football player. It's time for him to take that next step where you say that right side is shut down. That's what Ben Johnson is used to from number 58 in Honolulu Blue. He's got to get used to that from number 58 in dark blue here, because the Bears need him to be that type of player. They got to be able to lock down that side. I think he has that type of ability. He's got to be more consistent with it. And, he's tough as hell, right? I think his rookie year he played through a shoulder neck thing that he was dealing with for a while without missing time. He was out there last year as well. But he's got to take that next step to say, okay, no doubt about it, he's one of the best right tackles in the league. That's what he's got to do this year.
I love that, Herb, and this is fine. And not that Darnell Wright wasn't on my short list, but I did go with a different player. But I agree. Like Darnell Wright, given where he's drafted, where he needs to still continue to go in his career, he needs to be that guy, especially with all the uncertainty on this offensive line. Don't add another player at a very important position to that group, because there's already so much that the Bears are having to deal with at this point in time. We know Ben Johnson understands that. The Bears understand that. So Darnell Wright can solidify himself having a good 2025 season and justifying his draft status or draft pick in being a top 10 guy. So Darnell Wright, I'm wishing him the best, and I think he can get there. The guy I want to go with, and I was going back and forth on this guy, but it is Jaquan Brisker. I think there's a lot to prove for himself, just because, I mean, obviously a very impactful player when on the field, but it's just those concussions now at this point in his career. I just don't know what the status of Jaquan Brisker playing football and how long that's going to be moving forward. What's that going to even be like? Because everyone's talking about Kyler Gordon getting that extension. Well, Jaquan Brisker was also a second-round draft pick, a couple picks away from Kyler. He's not being talked about that at all, and it is because of his inability to be on the field because of those concussions. So I don't know if even a healthy, productive season where he's able to stay on the field, show that he can, avoid those concussions. I don't even know if that gets him an extension with this team, but Ryan Poles obviously did make him his second ever draft pick as a general manager of the Chicago Bears. So obviously you saw him as a building piece for this team moving forward. But at this point, there's just a lot of uncertainty, but he can maybe make it difficult. And, concussions are crazy, man. Like the one that he, had against the Carolina Panthers, really the tight end that inflicted the blow that, caused Brisker to be out for as long as he did. So sometimes it's not even his own doing, but if he can maybe have honestly, just a season that he was having before that concussion, like I think there's an interesting discussion there with what they want to do with the safety spot, because Jaquan Brisker is an impactful player. Just, injuries have not gone his way up to this point in his career, but I think he has a lot to prove that not the Bears. It could be still a possibility, but maybe for that next team, like he can be a physical presence in the run game, can make plays and when he's asked to, and as a cover 2 safety, whatever it may be. But Jaquan, I love talking to the guy in the locker room. He's really insightful and obviously he loves this team so much. You see his
He
Twitter,
does.
like how
He
he just like
does.
throughout games or Super Bowl, whatever. He's like, we'll be back. And he's talking about the Bears. Like, this is what we need. Like you just go on his Twitter, you'll see he loves his team, but he definitely has something to prove. And I think that if he stays healthy, he can show that.
Great guy, man. One of my favorite players on the team. I just hope, God willing, he's able to come back and play. I think if he's on the field, he's going to be impactful. I think the only thing that has to happen is he has to prove he can stay on the field. And it's one thing if it's, nagging issues and you talk about soft tissue or whatever, but these are concussions, and I don't know how you go about managing that. They should certainly force him to play with the what is it called?
Guardian cap.
The Guardian cap. I'm like Angel. The Guardian cap. They should certainly force him to play with that at the very least. And, maybe he takes a little bit more of a calculated risk. I've asked him that several times, and he's always like, man, Herb, this is the only way I know how to play. And I just, that's how he got here. I understand that. And you just hope that he can remain healthy, long enough to have the career that he hopes that he can have, the one I believe he can have, because I believe he could be a perennial Pro Bowl performer with his particular skill set, man. So to me, it's just all about him being able to stay healthy with the concussions. And if he can do that, I don't have much concern about how impactful he'll be. I got another one. This will be on offense, and it's Cole Kmet.
Okay, yeah.
I'm a fan of Cole Kmet, another super cool dude, but he hasn't had the production, and I don't think that's his fault. I think he was underutilized last year. Well, I think the first game he had like 7 snaps or something like that. It was insane. So I don't think it's his fault, but he's got to be able to be more impactful in the middle of the field and down in the red zone to where he can be a difference maker at the tight end position. I think he's one of the better tight ends in the league. I don't think he's, on the level of a George Kittle or like that, but I do think he's a really good player, and they got to find ways to utilize him more. But when those opportunities come, he has to take advantage of it. He's got to get open in the middle of the field. He's got to get open down the red zone. He's got to make, some of those contested catches. He's got to use his size. He's a really big dude to kind of box out some of those defenders in some of those tight area spaces. And if he can become the threat in the middle of the field and down the red zone, that's only going to open things up more for DJ and for Rome. And so big year for Cole Kmet. I know he got his contract, the year before last, and he deserves it, but it's time for him to actually, go out and be that type of dude where you're like, hey, this could be, a Pro Bowl type of player. You got to really consider him when you're talking about putting together your defensive game plan, and not as an afterthought, but as, one of the main people you want to stop going into the game.
That's a good person to add into this group too, because again, it's not going to be the same exact offense that Ben Johnson had in Detroit, but you saw what Sam Laporta was doing. Like his stats alone eclipsed every single stat that the Bears 3 tight ends had put out throughout the entire. And again, you didn't get much from Gerald Everett or Mercedes Lewis, but you just saw how much of a factor the tight end position could be when Ben Johnson's calling plays. So Cole Kmet is definitely up there. I'll throw another bonus one as well. DeAndre Swift. I just think that he was I think a very polarizing figure for depending on who you talk to, whether it was, Bears fans or media, whoever it was, but the guy that's capable of explosive plays. We saw that in a bunch of different games, especially when he got to the outside, was able to make people miss. I mean, he's hurdling some defenders. You can get that speed into the outside and break away from defenders, but it is stuff between the tackles that you wonder about. And obviously there's going to be the offensive line is going to factor into what he can do, but just on certain plays where maybe he's not seeing the hole properly or whatever it may be, like we need to see more of DeAndre Swift. He's being paid. And I do think that the Bears, if they find an opportunity to maybe add another running back to this room, they may do so, but DeAndre Swift can still show to Ben Johnson that he can be a capable playmaker, that you can get more out of if in his scheme, and also with some better blocking up front, because he is explosive. He should be an asset as more of a pass catcher too. I thought we'd just see a lot more of that, even though we didn't see a lot of great things from that Bears offense last season. But I think next year you should see some better things and just utilizing his skill set, man. Like I still believe to this day that if you line up DeAndre Swift and there's a linebacker out there, I'm taking DeAndre Swift in that matchup. So
For sure.
Again, he's a guy that he has obviously some things to prove. He has a contract that he needs to prove to not only himself, but to this fan base that he can be a contributor.
I'm with you, man. I agree with you on that, man. Just being that dynamic playmaker. I think he has the ability to do it. I think, creating more scenarios to get him the ball out in space will certainly help with that. And he's got to be better with his eyes as well as his feet in terms of running out of the backfield. And so I'm with you on that, man. I think like Cole Kmet, there were some reasons that he wasn't able to maximize his potential last year, but things are starting to fall into place. You should have better play calling. You should have better play design. He's got to be that guy that can impact the game from the running back position. And again, just divide some of that attention up, divide up some of those resources from the defensive perspective. Say, hey, you got to worry about number 4 in the backfield. You got to worry about 85. You got to worry about number 2. And now this 15 kid is causing problems over here. So you got to be able to use all of these, different weapons that you have. And the more of them that can rise to the top, it'll make, what they say, many hands make light work. So if they can do that, then that'll be better for everybody involved.
And you know what, Herb, I think is if we kept this show going, we could probably just keep adding players to listen. It goes back.
But those are the top guys.
Those are top guys. But it's also too because this Bears team won 5 games last season. If you're the Philadelphia Eagles, I wonder how many players are actually these are the guys that most approve when you have a good football team. And I think that, with more wins, more success, better offensive output, better defensive output, a better team in general, maybe that list gets a little shorter where it's not like the main contributors that need to contribute even more, improve even more in, the following season, but it's like the guys that are on the back end. And that's a good problem to have when the Bears eventually, hopefully, maybe get there. But yeah, the longer we go with this, oh wait, can we add X, Y, and Z? Probably could, because there wasn't a lot of, guys that you felt really good about after this season because it was a down year for the Bears.
That would be nice, man, to get to a space where, aren't talking about, so many people that need to take this step forward, but just, having guys in place that you already feel good about. I'll tell you what I feel good about. It is the super chat that came in from Kristen. Ooh. I know we threw it up on the screen, but I do want to go back and read it if I can figure out how to work this thing. Here we go.
Herb.
You'll be back on this side of the screen next week. She says, happy Valentine's Day, guys. I forgot it is Valentine's Day. I've been sick, man. I've been fighting the flu all day. Sorry if y'all see me kind of wiping my nose as we go through the show. Feeling a little better today, but now I got a bit of a runny nose. So anyway, happy Valentine's Day, guys. She says, men need love on this day as well, and you both deserve it. Great show. And Nick, you don't have to share this week with Herb since he won big. Always bear down. I can dig it, man. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody out there. To all the lovers out there, I suppose.
Yeah, enjoy the day. And, if you haven't gotten that gift, or maybe, chocolate and flowers, man, they go a long way. Do it while you still can. But, Crystal, we appreciate the heck out of you. You are the best. Hope you're having a great Valentine's Day, and everybody having a great Friday. And just enjoy the weekend. Unfortunately, no football, but we'll all make it through. And, Herb and I will be at the end of your week every week.
Yeah, you can always look forward to us on Friday.
You can always look forward to us. That's the consolation prize here. So appreciate everybody for hanging out with us. Herb, look, playing injured, you were texting me, you were dead yesterday. So I'm glad that you're up and running, talking some Bears football, being insightful as always, and always being just you. So I appreciate you and just kind of battling through here, man.
Gotta do it, man. Gotta do it. It is what it is. It's what I love to do, talk ball. And so haven't really been out of the bed much since Tuesday. But feeling a little better today. So we good. We rolling, man.
Rolling in. We'll keep this rolling. And you know what? Next week, I think I'm gonna put it on us. We're gonna solidify a name.
We'll have a name next week.
Next week we'll have a name and we'll keep this thing rolling. But it's been fun regardless. I guess being nameless, but Herb and I were going to talk ball and give you, everything you need, as you Bears fans love to hear from us and just everything going on around the team. But appreciate all of you hanging out on this Friday, and we'll see you next week. But until then, adios.